Tubes. All we can hear is all about political peccadillos and chicanery. It is time that we had a conversation in this country. It is time that we declutter and have a real conversation. And this is Siasa Bomba. I am Dibala Inem. Welcome to today's installment of Siasa Bomba. My name is Dibala Inem. I'm happy, I'm really stoked that you've joined us. Today we're turning our focus still on population, and primarily we're looking at social security, infrastructure, planning and population growth as issues that play a role in our political priorities. Right now, we know all the parties are aligning themselves even as we're gearing towards general election, but are these issues that they're putting on the table as far as the manifesto is concerned, or their manifestos. And I'm really happy also to be driving the show with me with very renowned political strategist and also a consummate professor of population. This is Professor Alfred Agwanda Otieno, who is an associate research professor, population studies and research institute at the University of Nairobi. He holds a PhD in population studies. His main area of interest is statistical demography. His studies have focused on policies and programs, comparative studies within African perspectives, and in monitoring and evaluation of programs. He has published and also co-authored several papers in peer-reviewed international journals such as PLOS 1, BMJ Social Science and Medicine, Journal of Biosocial Sciences, Demography, India and African Population Studies. He has published 3 books, or 3 book chapters, and co-authored 1 book, Urban Integration in Africa, Socio-Demographic Survey of Nairobi. So there is a rich, of course, repository of knowledge as far as population is concerned. We have as well Mr. Frederick Ashuse Shombe Okango, who is the Secretary, Political Affairs at KANU, an accomplished political strategist and commentator with extensive knowledge in multimedia communication, political management and strategy, leadership and governance. He is a Commonwealth scholar, a system thinking in a practitioner with interest in sustainable development environment and climate change and law as well. Currently he is a Secretary, Political Affairs in Kenya African National Union Party, that is KANU. And so, yes, we have the politics and we have the policies and the research also cognating to today. What a show are we going to have? You can peg your thoughts at Twitter handle, that is Siasa Bomba, using the same hashtag as well, Siasa Bomba, to also express your comments or ask your questions as well. But I'm glad to have you on board, Fred.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe just to get introductory remarks, even as we're heading towards this, a very heightened political season we have in the country. And I was wondering,
Absolutely.
The issue of population, given the statistics that we've been discussing, we have it here that Kenya's population has been growing rapidly over the last 30 years and is projected to double in about 23 years. Right, Fred, let's just begin with you in terms of preparation, because we know right now also your parties and many of them are preparing their manifestos. What we are concerning ourselves with in this particular discussion also centered in your manifestos.
Thank you, Dibal, and thank you for welcoming me to Siasa Bomba. I would say that as a country, we are not prepared. You just mentioned that the population with time is expected to double. And if you look at the current world population that is placed at 7 billion, then you come back to Kenya, when you refer to Worldometer, I think our population is around 55 million. As per the population census 2019, our population is at 47 million. Now, look at the demographics, the increasing number of youth, the young people, and that number is expected to attain what we could call demographic dividend that we have not achieved, and also the demographic transitions. That brings a very big risk to the country in terms of planning for such a young population in terms of economic growth, employment, opportunities, health, infrastructure, and the rest. And therefore, political parties, while planning, must ensure that while that is not yet achieved, how do they ascertain the numbers and how do they ensure that they have got infrastructure in place offered by the government to secure the lives of this youthful population, which otherwise, Dibal, can also be very useful in economic growth. So I would answer you by saying Kenya as a country, and having given the facts therein, are not ready for the increasing number of population. Even in 10 years, they will not be ready.
And Professor Alfred, of course, we know the last time, and we mentioned a good game in this particular program, we had the population statistical survey was in 2013, the first one in Africa. Is that correct? Have we had any before then?
No, that is incorrect.
It's incorrect.
Yeah. First of all, Kenya has regularly held its census since 1969, since independence, so it has been on time. And the second, Kenya always conducts its surveys, and one of the surveys which is regular since 1989 is called Demographic and Health Survey. But actually, it started in 1977 called Kenya Fertility Survey. So in 1970, that was a different organization, but it was the same scenario. So since 1989, every 5 years, Kenya conducts demographic and health surveys.
Every 5 years?
Every 5 years, since 1989. And as I'm talking to you, currently, because of the census of last year, it was postponed now so that they are going to have their demographic and health survey this year. And currently, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is training enumerators to conduct the survey. It delayed because it occurred at the same time as census. And census was given priority over the survey. Okay? So Kenya conducts regular demographic and health surveys, which assists in the first and foremost is planning for the future. Secondly is to understand the vulnerable populations or those who seem to be left behind. So those are the particular issues that concern the Kenya government in terms of their policies, in terms of their program approach. But the issue is, can we be able to generate resources for the current population and the future? That is what we call sustainable development. And since 1995,
yes,
when we held International Population Conference in Cairo, there was a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is that the human being is the center of development. And apart from being the center of development, that human being should also be able to participate in choosing the options for
I'm inclined to wonder then, who was the center of development if it was not a human being?
Before they were scattered.
They were scattered, okay.
Yeah. So it's 1994 that the ICP, the International Conference of Population and Development, that encouraged one thing, that we plan for the human being, and the human being is supposed to take part also in that planning. So it's double-edged. So we do not plan for animals, neither do we plan for buildings, but we plan for a human being, and therefore any other thing added is for this human being to live a better quality of life. That is the same. That is from 1994, Cairo. So we call it ICPD at Cairo. In 2018, the ICPD plus 25 held at Nairobi, same Africa, it reaffirmed what all the United Nations countries reaffirmed the same principle, that the human being is the center of development, but we must recognize also the diversity that exists. That not everybody born even twins do not share similar orientations. We have to acknowledge this and take that into account. So there is always what we call demographic diversity. Each and every individual has the unique potential, but has also certain frailties that we need to account for. Yeah.
All right. So I like the aspect that you're bringing, demographic diversity.
Yes.
And when we're even talking about demographic diversity, we had a very controversial also debate here regarding what is really coming to the fore with the transgender reassignment and the intersex as well, coming to the forum. How does it really change you, or the aspect, even from a scholar's perspective here in the country, of the demographic diversity, or that is dramatically different from what you're talking about?
Well, that's different from what people talk about.
Yes.
First of all, we talk about demographic diversity because at present, when you take a picture of the Kenyan population as at now, there is a 1 second year born, and there is a 100-year-old person. So that's the first diversity that you have.
Age. Yes, age.
2, we recognize biologically that there are 2 sexes. We don't use gender.
We don't use gender?
We don't use, because gender changes. Sexes. That there's male and there's female. So gender is now a social construction of the roles of males and females in society. It's now when you add gender. So it's bad to ask anybody, what's your gender?
What's your gender?
Yeah.
It's a misnomer.
It's a misnomer. So we don't use it.
You don't use it?
Yeah, but other people use it and so on. But when we start with, we only have male, female. But you can recognize that there are certain few individuals that might not conform to those 2. Not from social construction,
yes,
but biological error or an accident that can happen. You remember in the last census we had
the intersex?
Intersex.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but generally for many countries, male, female.
Male, female.
From biological point of view. Then we add gender from social point of view, how you are assigned your roles and responsibilities by the society. Yeah.
All right. Let's just get to Fred on that. I don't know if you want to chime into what our professor is saying before we gravitate to other issues as well.
I agree with the professor. But also we have to remember that even the aspect of gender itself politically has been a very hot debate. And if you look at the provision of social services, majority of the female gender have argued that they are marginalized. And to that extent, they have demanded for more from government so that they are at par with the other partner, the other gender, the male, for that matter, for this explanation. If you look at it, it is important that even as we provide social infrastructure, or rather social security, to the 2 sexes, male, female, we must identify which of them is vulnerable most and which one of them needs special attention. And that's why in the provision of law, Article 100, the female were identified, now called women, as a special interest group. That must be taken care of when planning, when budgeting, and when representing and legislating, and even when making policy. Because their needs have changed. Their needs keep changing. And that population of the female gender, if you look at 2019 census, by the way, in 2019, the theme for the census was counting our people for sustainable development and devolution of services. Why did they say that? Because they realized that there are certain aspects of that gender that, if not met in the immediate terms, then will affect the entire population. For example, things to do with mortality rate. For example, things to do with fertility rate. Because we are at a country where we have a growing population. But look, how do we deal with the growing population and the economy is not growing. Vision 2030 projected the economic growth rate at 10%. We have not achieved that. But with the challenges of social demographics and the rest, then we must start planning for a special interest group called the women, the youth, the disabled, and at some point I'm sure we'll talk about the ethnic minority. So I agree with Prof. While segregating them, we must be careful so that we look at the inter and the intra of that specific unit of population.
Right, thank you. Let's gravitate the discussion a bit now to, urbanization, because I think also that one is, it goes really hand in hand with population growth. And it is estimated almost 50% of Kenya's population will be living in urban areas by 2030. And we wonder, looking at the spatial planning, even from our cities, as it were, I think the last time that we had that launch was in 2016, right? And given 2030 is just here, how many years down the line? Another 8 years, we'll be having a dramatically different city altogether. Do you think, from your own assessment, Prof, the government, especially the county government of Nairobi and other urban areas as well, have a concrete spatial plan to go in tandem with this given projection?
Yeah, let me start from the fact that urbanization is inevitable. Whether we like it or not, it will occur. 2, that urbanization is also an opportunity. You can put people in the concentration of people, provide services per capita easier than when you're in the rural. Look at just electricity. To pick electricity from one point here, and if the next homestead is 2 or 3 kilometers away, then you have to step it up, then step it down. It has such a higher cost. So urbanization is inevitable. And what now we think about is how do we plan for it? Okay? This is one of the things of the 21st century and for developing countries. Yes, we are still at a lower level, but we are not planning for rapidly changing urban population. Let's take an example. How many Kenyans are homeless in the urban areas? Before we just talk about how many Kenyans are homeless, we don't know. Because there has not been any official published information on those who live in 4 walls and a roof and a door, and those who live on the streets. So the first thing is that we are not taking into account the increasing number of people living in in urban centers. 2, we are not anticipating the number of people living in urban centers. This needs to be taken into account. Fundamentally, planning for development is taking into account the current population and without jeopardizing the needs for the future. How much are we prepared to account for the needs of the future urban population if we don't plan for it now? We only know how many people are in the urban centers, but that is not enough. We need to know how many are where and what services do they have. What it particularly says is that when the development is about human being, it's about living in better conditions. So how much are we prepared to know how many people live in the urban area? How many people are without any services, which is their right? So the political parties have not seen anything that they mentioned with regard to the people of Kenya. Yet, we all assigned and tested that by 2030, we should not leave anybody behind. How many people are we leaving behind? He has just mentioned that we are leaving women behind. But how many people are we leaving behind or pushing behind? How many people?
So the political parties, even with their 20 points agenda, as it were, they are not, gelling with what is the reality of the ground. That is what you're saying at the end of the day. When it comes to urbanization.
Yeah, the idea of a political party is how the groups of people come together on how to share resources in a country. And how to share resources.
I disagree with Prof.
Yeah,
which politics at the end of the day is all about.
It's the sharing of resources.
Yeah, the sharing of resources.
You are not going to generate any resource from somewhere else. It's resources of the country. Now, how do you share resources? You share resources among the people who live in the country.
That's true.
Okay? Now, how you share it is there are differences. There are different manifestos and so on.
Right.
But the main thing, they all say how we equitably share the resources of the country to people.
Not to be agreeing with you on
that. Prof was a bit intelligent. What he did, he rephrased his answer. But with that as name, Dibal, you know, in this country, we are governed by the rule of law. And we have got structures of sharing resources. But when you look at the homeless, are they counted as part of the people who don't have a roof over their head at any given time or at all times? That data is not available. However, we have the data that shows that how many households we have. The last population...
But whose remit is it to actually make
sure... It's the government. It's the government.
Which part of the government?
It's the government.
Which ministry?
You know, Jebal, when you are planning for those who are born and those who have not been born, because you do projections. And the Prof will correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. However, the urban population today in Kenya is 28.7%. That is over 14 million people are staying in urban. The infrastructure in urban is stretched. Look at the slum upgrading system, the slum dwellers. That infrastructure comes with sanitation, water, electricity. Forget about food for now. It is stretched. Now, when the government plans through their manifesto and through policies. And that's why we say political parties are a group of citizens who are coming together, first of all, to form government and then perform or offer services to that government. Okay? Now, in Kenya today, we have a government. The government of President Uhuru Kenyatta, for the last 9 years and a half or so, they came up with what they call affordable housing. That was not enough. As Kenya African National Union, we appreciate, and we are saying now, we must have affordable and decent housing for every Kenyan. That is an agenda under social security pillar in our manifesto that is bringing back this country to business. And we are saying the first thing that the political parties must do, they must understand that housing is more important than any other infrastructure.
So are you insinuating in any way that you know, the affordable houses that we get now from the government are not decent?
I'm saying, other than being affordable, it must be decent. What aspect of decency that we are looking at? We are looking at issues with sanitation. You can have a house over your head, Dibal, it has no water, it has no electricity, the sanitation is not to the standard as expected, then it is not what is envisioned in Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya that guarantees you. This is not a privilege, this is a right. And it is the work of the government to do that. As political parties that are progressive like Kenya African National Union, we understand that that is an aspect of social infrastructure that must be in our document that we are selling to the people of Kenya, so that when we acquire power, we are not only promising, but we are committing to do that aspect of social life. Number two, Dibal, we have also looked at the issues that come with rural urban migration. I agree with the Prof. It is inevitable. And by the way, in the next few years, you will look at the number of people in urban centers, not cities. It will increase. then the ones in the cities will budge. Why? Because majority of the social infrastructure and systems are found in urban centers. And that's why, as a political party, KANU, we are saying to cure that, we must now strengthen devolution and access to services by taking all these services to the people's doorsteps in the villages and in the wards. How? We are saying, if it is an issue of water, electricity, housing, we must have them first at the village level so that you lower rural-urban migration.
Yeah, just leave it at that. Prof, I'm pinched for time. I just give you also 30 seconds to just give your closing remarks.
I think the first fundamental thing is that we plan for the human being.
Plan for the human being.
And not that when we plan for the human being, we must also give the opportunity for human being to take part in that planning. Now, when we do this, we need to take into account evidence. And the only evidence we have is data. I hope whichever party wins, we may improve on our day-to-day vital registration.
Absolutely.
Without data, there's no end. We keep on moving up and down on the wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Right, Secretary General, welcome. Your closing remarks.
I think there is a greater potential for this country to attain economic development that is sustainable by first looking at the data available, planning for now and for tomorrow. But when you talk about social infrastructure and security, then we must go and look at the enablers. The enabler number one is health. And more specifically, let's look at reproductive health that affects the women. Then let's go and look at the world equalizer called education. How many have access to education? Then look at housing. How decent are they and how accessible and affordable are they? But lastly, Dibal, these are not easy to do if the information is not accessible, it is not pinned down by legislation and policy, and it does not provide benefit to the majority. And majority here, I mean more than the population that we have. At least majority of that, if not half, but at least 2/3 of it. I mean, three quarters of it. So that we start talking about a country that is equitable and inclusive. Otherwise, we'll be talking about these things as promises and not commitments.
Fantastic.
As KANU, we are committing.
Thank you, thank you. I think I'll give you an invoice also on this show. Yeah, because you really promoted KANU as well today. Thank you very much, Frederick Kango, Secretary Political Affairs at KANU. Thank you. We also want to thank you, Professor Alfred Otieno, Associate Research Professor, Population Studies, Research Institute, University of Nairobi. Thank you for your rich stream of information. I've really learned a lot.
Thank you.
I'll not be using now demographic dividend anymore. Yeah, it is demographic potential.
It's dividend when you achieve it.
Yes, dividend when you achieve it. Now you know, at least you've not taken anything from this particular show. At least now you know about demographic dividends and demographic potential.
And demographic transition.
And demographic transition as well. Thank you very much for that rich stream of information. And for you, valued company, on watching Siasa Bomba, my name is Divan. Have an easy one.